Warning! The following video contains possibly the most controversial thing in this entire game. And it also contains me expressing my opinions on this, which actually differ quite significantly from the norm. I have already equipped my flame shield in anticipation. Any of you who wish to comment on this video, I suggest you do the same. Again, disclaimer, I take no responsibility for any flame wars that may ensue as a result of this video. We now return to the regular presentation. So, that sounded kind of ominous, so I wonder what that could be hinting towards. Well, you'll see a little bit later. If you had really any knowledge of this game or have been following it since its release, chances are you know what's about to happen. It's probably one of the biggest changes in the remake, and it's been really divisive among the fanbase. But anyway, before this, we need to make sure that we get rid of these thieves. First though, we should definitely kill this guy, because Patria is not going to like being hit by another one of these. And yes, fortunately we have Sheeta here. Now we see none of the benefits of the Falcon Knight class. Critical when it's totally unnecessary. No, I mean more that have you got higher resistance? Damn it, Sheeta, you could have at least gained strength or something. Well, at least all her good stats is max, so she has kind of an excuse for getting no ups, but still, again, strength or defense or even resistance would be appreciated, and that was massive overkill. But it looks as though now that we're onto them and the thieves are still stuck in the mountains, yeah, we're going to get rid of all these thieves before they have a chance to get to the village. So at first I was kind of worried. I was wondering whether it was even possible without the warp staff, but it looks like it is. Now, of course, we're going to have to keep Minerva away from these enemies. The next part of this chapter will be trying to get Marth to this village while provoking as few wyverns as possible. I still hate wyverns. Yeah, if you need an update on that. Speaking of which, just yesterday, just after I recorded the last part of this, I played a bit of Xenoblade Chronicles. I'm right up to the end game of that, by the way, and I will say it's possibly one of the most awesome end games ever. Any game I've ever played. Seriously, it is amazing, and I could not recommend that game more to anyone. Except if you are going to play it, I would recommend you set aside a lot of time, because, lots of side quests. Anyway, sorry, in that game, I recently found a weapon off a random drop called Wyvern Cutlass. Yeah, I think gaming in general is just trolling me with that fear. You know, first you get a Wyvern appearance in Pokemon, then that, then Wyverns here. Speaking of Wyverns, now would be a good time to probably talk about, this cave. Yes, this is the last cave in the game, and by waiting on this one you get a, talisman. I mean, that's not all that fantastic, but, I guess it's alright, really. I mean, I'd probably rather have the arm scroll. Anyway, like I was saying, now, Wyvern in this game. That Wyvern is going to attack Sheeta, isn't he? That's annoying. She should probably be healed before that, but anyway, again, now there's a bunch of wyverns. Oh, that guy's got thorns, but that's kind of painful. And there's a bunch of meteor, keep wanting to call them meteor mages, because I guess that's kind of literally, no, meteor sorcerers. Again, that does not roll off the tongue well. Anyway, though, we've got to watch out for that guy too. Yeah, we're trying to provoke as few wyverns as possible. The Berserkers, they've got alright stats by this point, and in fact, speaking of the Berserkers, I should probably say, yeah, remember how I said earlier that, the clans would start using Berserkers around this point? Yeah, it's now. Yeah, like I said, they'd be using Berserkers later. And hey, resistance again, that's interesting. And kind of useful, considering that he's going to be needing resistance around this point in the game, because, yeah. Because we'll be encountering an awful lot of powerful magic users starting with the last few chapters, so, yeah, resistance is going to really come in handy. Anyway, though, like I was saying about the clansmen with their Berserkers, yeah, in the original Mystery of the Emblem, I've probably said this before, they mostly used the Barbarian class, which was sort of an enemy-only axe-using class that kind of acted... I always thought they were roughly the equivalent of Berserkers in the later games, so a lot of people called that they'd be replacing them all with Berserkers in this game. Turns out they didn't actually fully replace them all with Berserkers until right now, so, yeah, but it's at this point where, yes, they do start replacing the Berserkers, which is kind of annoying given that Berserkers have a critical bonus and the equivalent class back in the original FE3 didn't. So, that's, yes, critical bonus can be annoying. But by this point, most of the decent characters tend to have high enough luck to avoid being critted by these guys, well, to at least mitigate the crit chance considerably. And even if they do have a, you know, non-existent crit chance, will still have such low hit rates that, yeah, they're not really that much of a threat. I also want to move this Wyvern here. Fortunately, I've got a Brave Sword. Anyway, about Wyverns, this will probably be the last chance I get to actually fully explain about this. In the original Mystery of the Emblem, Wyverns, the enemy Wyverns you fought in Unri's Way in this chapter, actually looked exactly the same as the Wyverns written by the Draconite class. And of course, when they said that this place was the home of Macedon's famous Wyverns, the implication was that the Wyverns you encounter as enemies are actually the very same beasts that are ridden by the Draconite class. The implication is that those from Macedon/Maiden/ whatever you want to call it, have tamed these creatures somehow and used them as mounts. Now, in this game, they actually don't look all that similar. I think, because, of course, the Draconite sprite in this game, you'll see it in Catria Attacks next, actually does have 4 legs. You'll notice the enemy Wyverns, and I just coincidentally stumbled across the secret shop. It's in between the mountains, and it's this one tile of plain in between all these mountains. And this one is important because it sells stat boosters. So if you've got a lot of cash on hand, I'd recommend just go crazy with buying these stat boosters, because this is really the last chance you have to spend all this gold. Unless you really want to get some level ups to the drill grounds from now on, really. So what I'm doing is I'm buying all of the arm scrolls, and just about one of each remaining item. And 2 speed wings, just because, you know, they're more important. A couple of extra points in speed can mean the difference between doubling and not doubling, and that's really significant. Anyway, basically then one of each of the others. I'll actually only use those probably not until the final chapter, and I will keep record of my character's stats, not including those, because again, I want to actually realistically compare my characters to their average stats, and I can't do that if I use stat boosters. So, I will use them, but in the final stat analysis, I will ignore those, what I've got for stat boosters. So, yeah, anyway, this one here. Most endgame secret shops do sell stat boosters. It's kind of a tradition in the series. So, yeah, if you've got gold to spare, feel free to splash up this one. But just be sure to bring the silver card too, otherwise the stuff is pretty damn expensive. Okay, like I was saying about Wyverns, yes, the enemy Wyverns you might notice only have back legs and wings. It's implied that their front legs have developed into wings, which is kind of more realistic of, real-life animal evolution. I think my dad always used to tell me when I was a kid that a lot of the dragons you see in stories and games are pretty unrealistic, given that the wings generally had to evolve out of arms, and that would mean that the you know, winged western dragons probably would have had to evolve out of some lizard with 6 legs. But anyway, it seems Wyverns do indeed, their front legs have developed into wings, as the evidence seems to suggest. But, yeah, the actual Wyverns written by playable Draconites, and enemy ones obviously, all still have 2 sets of legs in addition to their wings. So that's a bit of a strange thing, but I'm guessing this is because the Shadow Dragon was developed first. And, well, I can actually fly in and hit that Meteor guy right now if I want, but I'd be exposed to a Swordmaster and 2 Berserkers, so I don't really fancy my chances. Then again, Catria's got good enough defense, so she can probably do this. This will really help in getting to the village. Anyway, like I was saying, yes, you can see Catria in the sprite here. Notice, count the legs. Notice they've got a short pair of forelimbs as well as the back legs, which is different from the actual enemy Wyverns. Now, yeah, the reason for this, I'm guessing, is because Shadow Dragon was made before this game, and since Draconites existed in Shadow Dragon, they had to come up with a design for them, and since they presumably at the time had no idea they'd be remaking this one, they didn't really care about them looking the same as the Wyvern classes in this one. So they make this game, and they're like, oh wait, we've got to do a design for the Wyvern classes. They make the design for the Wyvern, and then they realise, wait a minute, we've already got a Draconite sprite, and they were too lazy to change it, so you end up with the 2 mounts looking different. I guess this does, prevent some of the issues of the fact that they were clearly implied to be the same creature, but in the original Mystery of the Emblem, it'd make you ask, why can't these wyverns ridden by Draco Knights breathe fire? Unless somehow their domestication has somehow meant they can't breathe fire anymore? Because, let's just face it, if Draco Knight classes could have their mounts breathe fire on you, they would be ridiculously cheap. Like, they would seriously be one of the most broken, and okay, you gotta appreciate this, 94 hits against a Swordmaster on a mountain. That is pretty ridiculous. Oh, well, at least you got something there. Anyway, like I was saying, so wyverns, you know, the ones ridden by the Draco Knights, yeah, they look kind of different in this game when they're not really supposed to. They are implied to be the same creature, but again, like, try and, if anyone is listening to this in the comments, come up with your own reasons why the tame wyverns can't breathe fire. Because I'd like to know why you all think that. It's kind of something that, yeah, it's a little hard to explain, but again, mostly for game balance reasons, because it would be ridiculously overpowered if they could do that. Again, speaking of wyverns, wyverns have had a bit of a history throughout the series, although not exactly. The Draco Knight class in the Japanese version has always been called Dragon Knight, as it was in the original game, and however, even the original Mystery of the Emblem implied their mounts were actually wyverns rather than full dragons. Okay, Minerva should be ready to get to the village next turn, but before then we've got a Berserker to take down. And a Meteor guy. So I'll just put myself in range to take him down next turn. Anyway, in the Eve games though, the class was localized as Wyvern Rider rather than Dragon Knight, presumably so as not to create a plot hole. The game specifically mentions that all the dragons in that universe were banished during the Scouring. So, yeah, presumably to distinguish those mounts from the dragons fought during the Scouring, they changed the class to Wyvern Rider. But this caused a bit of a strange problem when, for one, they referred to a certain rank in the Burn Army called Wyvern General, which doesn't really... Yeah, given that Burn seems to have a lot of dragon motifs in their just general culture, I'm guessing that was a rank, not a class. So, and the rank really was only significant back in, Sword of Seals. So you can kind of forgive the, translators for not picking that up, but yeah, it really should have been Dragon Generals. For those of you wondering, the Dragon Generals were sort of the kind of the sort of overpowered enemy mini-boss squad in that game. Every Fire Emblem game has one. This one didn't really, but the remake added the Assassins, so they kind of served as that. You know, the others are like the 4 Fangs, the 4 Riders, which I think should have been translated as 4 Horsemen. I'll get to that later. Anyway, this conversation here. This is probably the first time that you want to visit a village with someone other than Marth. Well, they actually can't visit the village. But, if you have Minerva wait on this village, you get a conversation that kind of acts as if she was visiting the village. And, yeah, the opening chapter hints didn't really imply you'd actually need to use her. But then again, what other male Draco Knights do you know in this mythology? Of course, it had to be Michalis. Now, Michalis has something important he needs to give to Marth, but Minerva clearly doesn't want him dying on her, even though he's kind of so insistent on it. Was he strong and noble when he murdered his father? Well, I guess that was Garnet manipulating him into doing that. Anyway, Minerva now seems to, yeah, think he's being too weak like this. And yes, now that conversation didn't seem to do anything, but next you have to visit the village with Marth. So, until he does that, I guess I can talk about more of that, oh right, that's it, wyverns. Then you get Sacred Stones, and then you run into a bit of a slight problem. Because Sacred Stones introduced the Wyvern Knight class that was in fact still called Wyvern Knight in the Japanese version. And its mount, well, had no forelegs, it just had a pair of back legs and wings, so it was obviously meant to be an actual wyvern, as opposed to the sort of ambiguously dragon mounts of the other classes. So that caused a bit of problems, and that led to the only thing distinguishing that class from the others, in the English version being the fact that it was called Wyvern Knight rather than a Wyvern Rider or Lord. Half of Radiance kept with the usual naming, and then Radiant Dawn reverted it back to the Japanese and went with Draconite again, and the promoted version being Dragon Master. Now, that was in fact the last game that featured those, so only time will tell if Awakening goes with that localization or goes back to FE7. And only time will tell if the upgraded version will be called Dragon Master or Dragon Lord. Dragon Lord was the name of the promoted, third tier version in Radiant Dawn, but that wasn't the case. In the Japanese version, that class was called Lindworm, which was named after a specific breed of dragon-like creature. And, wow, I am really surprised that the cap is not 28. It's got to be either 29 or 30, and I will be saying this right now, I don't think Ryan is ever going to reach that cap at this rate. I mean, I think he did on my very first playthrough. Yeah, when he didn't get Speed Screwed. Speaking of Speed Screwed, he didn't for that level up, he got Speed, finally. Anyway, there aren't many enemies left on the map, yeah, there's not exactly all that much to say, rather than we'll have to lure this Thoron guy and get rid of him. Oh, and there's also a couple of shops here. I'll just show off quickly what they sell, because I spent all my money on stat boosters, so I'm not actually going to have enough money to buy anything here. There's really only like one significant thing here, and that's a little risky. That is a bit risky. But, good thing I critted. Yeah, I'm normally a bit iffy about taking on enemies that have, like, a critical rate above 5%. Actually, I'm a bit iffy about taking on enemies with a critical rate above 1% if the critical would kill me. Now Marth is about to visit this village, so, this is pretty important, so I'll stop what I'm talking about and go on to this. Now, this conversation is completely unaltered from the original Mystery of the Emblem. Yes, Miss Charlotte was still in the village in that game, and yes, in the original game, this is what happened. He was dying here. Of course, his whole injured sprite is unique to this game. Back then, he just got his normal one. And he's going to give us the Starlight Tome, which, as he says, is the only tome that can damage Garnet. Because of that, this is the reason I told you to stop those thieves pronto. Because without this spell, you can't defeat Garnet. And if you can't defeat Garnet, you can beat the game, but defeating Garnet gets you the Falchion. Without that, beating the final boss is much harder. Anyway, Michalis really wants to save Minerva and his sister Maria. And from that we get Starlight. Now, in the original Mystery of the Emblem, that was Michalis' death right then. Or at least he was heavily implied to die then. In this game, well, you might think, what was the point of having Minerva wait on this village first? It does do something, but you won't see the effect of it until the very end of this chapter. For the time being, let's check out the shop selection. We had an armory that sells killer weapons over there, one here that sells silver weapons and distance weapons, a vendor that sells, well, actually, recover staves, but no particularly powerful magic. I would have expected at least one shop to sell Bolganone, at least. And that one just sells door keys, vulneraries, and pure water. Like, seriously, I would have expected at least one shop in this game to sell even, you know, Bolganone. Probably not Thoron, but maybe Bolganone? I don't know. Just strange that I couldn't find that in the shop. Anyway, now that we've got Starlight and there's really only one enemy we need to take down, this chapter is pretty much done. Now, one thing I want to say, this chapter is actually ridiculously easy to warp skip. The boss is very, very easy. So you can just warp someone over there, kill the boss, dance for your warp staff using Athena, then warp Marth over and see. Don't do this, because if you do this, you'll miss out on Starlight. And without Starlight, well, you'll make the game that much harder on yourself. So again, fortunately the thieves get, wow, resistance? Really? Fortunately, the thieves pretty much get stuck going through the mountains. But, yeah, you gotta make sure to take them down as fast as you possibly can, because if you lose this village, you've lost the main way of defeating the final boss. So, yeah, that is pretty bad. So, again, you want to rush this village as fast as you can, but you also want to make sure you have Minerva wait on it before Marth sees. Believe me, you'll see why at the end of the chapter. And at first, it's kind of weird. This bit doesn't come up until, you know, may as well use the Brave Axe. He's got no chance of critting me. But I certainly have a chance of critting him. Goodbye, generic heretic. Yeah, he does get a boss theme, unlike the generic general back in Chapter 18, or the generic Ice Dragon back in Chapter 13, I believe. But we're about ready to seize. And that is basically this chapter, but we've got a lot of scenes afterwards. And we get ominous scenery, I think one that's never actually been shown before. And so we're finally here at the Dragon's Altar, the very definitely final dungeon of this game. And hey, it seems Gotoh is meeting us in person here, rather than in hologram like he did before. I believe back in Shadow Dragon, the only time you met him in person, as in not a hologram, was in the final chapter, but only if you didn't go to 24X. Speaking of Chapter 24X in that game, in the very next chapter, something from that is going to make an appearance, and something very interesting about the story and the canon path of Shadow Dragon is going to be revealed. But anyway, Gotoh here is finally showing himself. He's not playable in this game, unfortunately. He does actually have data, like stat data, as a playable character, or at least a unit on the map. But it's kind of weak. It's only used for his brief appearance in Chapter 14. I guess, you know, everyone who appears on the map kind of has to have a stat model, you know, has to have like a model and stats, you know. Kind of like how, back in Path of Radiance, Elincia, whenever she appeared on the map in Path of Radiance, she was using the female bishop class as sort of a dummy class, which, funnily enough, Kurth Naga also used in that game. I find it kind of hilarious that in that game, Kurth Naga's class is listed as female bishop. Basically, everyone in that game who only appears on the map as an NPC but never in combat is a female bishop, even males. Anyway, this conversation is the second of 3 that occur after this chapter. The second one, this is in fact the final optional clothing item for my unit. So, this is a hat made of animal skin. For males, it's sort of a leopardy type thing. For females, well, you'll see in the next chapter. So it actually is kind of different from males and females, but, like all the options, I'm going to say yes to it, because I've got to show off all of them anyway. So, also, enjoy this conversation, because it's probably the only character development you'll ever see out of Ymir in this game. Now, this conversation is the most important. This one here only occurs if you did everything I told you to. Have Minerva visit the village before turn 15, well not visit, just wait on it, and then have Marth visit, and you get this. Yes, turns out Michalis is not quite gone. And yes, sending Minerva there saved his life, only because his pride simply will not allow him to die in front of her. If you didn't send Minerva to this village first, Michalis will die just, like normal when you visit the village with Marth. But he's still acting like kind of a jerk, but at least he's on our side for the moment. He's on our side? Yes, he is. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you... Yes, Michalis is indeed recruitable in this game. I remember probably the biggest holy crap moment that the fans who first discovered this game got was when the hackers first cracked open the playable character data and noticed Michalis' name among them. And eventually people figured out the incredibly convoluted method of actually recruiting this guy, and well, let's just say the fandom kind of exploded, both for good, in that, hey, wow, it's an actually fully new playable character who wasn't even in the original history at all, or who wasn't even playable in Shadow Dragon even. And on the other hand, yes, it kind of fractured the fan base as well, and I'll discuss that later. But for the time being, let's talk about him stat-wise. Michalis is another priest mode, but the one thing that sets him apart from most other priest modes is, look at those base stats. Yes, he actually has decent bases. Wow. It's like they finally remembered that stats don't all cap at 20 anymore, and they've decided to give at least one priest mode actual alright bases. Now really, these are the kind of bases that every priest mode in this game should have had. Again, this really is, again, like, the bad bases is the reason that most priest modes you got earlier on really sucked. The fact that this guy actually has something vaguely resembling base stats immediately elevates him to at least usable, but certainly he is among one of the better pre-promotes in this game because he's also no slouch in the growth department either. In fact, he averages maxed out skill and speed. Granted, he only needs to gain 1 point of speed to max it, and with a 55% growth and 8 level ups to make use of it, that is definitely going to happen. But still, I mean, a pre-promote who maxes 2 stats on average, I mean, that is really, really good. And yeah, so I will say that, I mean, he's up there with the likes of Sirius as some of the best pre-promotes in this game. He joins ridiculously late though, but that's not really all that much of a problem. I mean, he's got enough of, you know, he's got the actual base stats to really start doing some decent work already, and 23 average defense at level 20 is actually not that bad by Draco Knight standards in this game, really. And his strength, well, his strength is a little low for the class, I'll be honest, but he gets the job done. He can use Silver Lances and Axes immediately, too. And, yeah, that is pretty much all there is to it. Michalis is pretty decent. There's only there's only 2 real complaints I have about him. One, his luck, with an absolutely abysmal base and very bad growth rate, too. He's not going to be getting good amounts of luck, and this means that he's not going to be dodging that much, and he might get critted a lot. Yeah, that's a bit of a problem. Of course, he's got good defense, but around this point in the game, most of the hits you'll be taking are in fact magical, so that's not really all that much of a thing. And yes, there's also a couple more complaints about him story-wise. One, he does not get a special boss conversation with Garnet, despite the fact that Garnet very nearly kills him. You'd think he'd have some kind of reaction to seeing someone who, you know, thought he killed. And 2, and this is probably the most annoying thing of all about Michalis, despite the fact that his entire goal throughout the whole game has been to rescue Maria, he cannot actually recruit her in the final chapter. You still only can use Minerva for that, which is really annoying, because again, this has been literally the basis of Michalis' character development in this game, and it's the whole reason he's even on your side to begin with. And he can't do that one thing he's been setting out to do the whole game, so that's pretty annoying. Granted, if he could recruit Maria, I would actually recommend using him over Minerva in the final chapter. As it stands though, you gotta use her anyway, he's not changing that, which, yeah. Again, I would actually much rather use this guy in the final chapter than Minerva, because, again, look at those bases and look at those averages. They are pretty nice for a pre-promote. But as it stands, yeah, we're gonna have to make do with Minerva, sadly. But anyway, if you want to use Michalis in the last few chapters, go ahead. He's actually really useful for the little time you got him. And, yeah, he's actually pretty decent stat-wise, so again, kind of full of surprises here in terms of both being unexpectedly recruited and being unexpectedly good by pre-promote standards, except that luck. That luck is a problem. But enough about him stat-wise. I think I should probably go on about this, and just be warned, this might take a while. There's been a lot of controversy in the fanbase regarding Michalis' survival in this game and his recruitment, and I think I'm going to talk about it now. So, just be warned, I'm going to equip my Flame Shield right now, I'm going to give my honest 2 cents on this issue, and I really hope people don't flame me. Okay, I personally do not fall into the camp who are annoyed at the fact that he survived. In fact, quite the opposite. In fact, I find the fact that there is a whole legion of fans that are really angry that this guy was even allowed to live, I actually find it almost disgusting. Yes, he was an antagonist in the last game. Yes, he was a tyrant. Yes, he was unrepentant back then. Yes, he killed his own father. But in this game, there is evidence that he does want to make an effort to reform. And yet, there are some people who seem to have in their minds the only way a previous antagonist can ever atone for their past evil deeds is to die. This really does not make me feel good, and I personally don't think it's a really good way of looking at things. Yeah, the whole redemption equals death thing is kind of fitting, but you know what? It's a cliche. It's been done to death by so many games of this genre. And actually, you know, letting a previous antagonist live and giving them another chance, that's actually quite refreshing, I find. You know, for this whole genre, again, I do think the whole redemption equals death thing, you know, as fitting as it is sometimes, it has sort of been done to death. No pun intended. Now, I actually do understand people not really finding him likable because he's still a bit of a jerk towards your army. And then there's his ending. Yes, his ending has caused quite a bit of controversy, and we'll get to that when we get to it because I don't want to spoil anything. But for the time being, I'll just discuss this as is. There is a whole legion of fans who are so angry at this. They think the only reason that he survived and was allowed a second chance is because he's pretty. Let me tell you something, if physical attractiveness was the only thing that determined whether a villain got a second chance in this game, then Kleiner and Irania sure as hell would not have been allowed to die. Yes, they are living proof that this is not the case. Now, there is also the case made that if this guy got a second chance and was allowed to live and be recruitable, then why not Hardin? And I do kind of agree with that. Hardin was overall a more sympathetic character. He had a more sympathetic reason for what he did, and he was, again, more sympathetic in his last moments. However, there is one reason why I believe this did not happen with Hardin. In my personal opinion, it's this. Hardin was an endgame boss. Having him recruitable would simply cheapen that. Again, if you have a really epic boss fight against someone towards the end of the game, it kind of loses some of its impact and meaning if they immediately recover and become recruitable afterwards. So yeah, I think the reason why, again, Hardin is not recruitable is, again, sort of narrative progression and also following gameplay tropes. Again, if you've built up some character to be a really powerful late-game boss, and you have a really epic boss fight against them, it kind of loses a little bit if they're, again, immediately recruitable afterwards, which he probably would have to be if this was the case. So, yeah, that's my opinion on why the same thing didn't happen with Hardin. And personally, again, I actually would have liked Hardin to have been recruitable. Again, he was really good back in Shadow Dragon, and he's a nice character, and I like the guy. So again, I understand why some people are annoyed with him not getting a second chance. But I still think, again, people should give Miss Charlotte another think over, because really, again, I just don't really like the fact that the fanbase is just obsessed with the fact that the only way someone can possibly atone for their sins is to die. Again, yeah, I just can't really agree with that. I'm sorry. I should probably stop now, though, before I get too passionate about this or anything like that, but that's just my 2 cents on the issue, and I wanted to get this out there. I am doing a playthrough of this game. This is my playthrough of this game, and yeah, well, this is my opinion, and I'm just getting it out there. So, yeah, that's it. And I think I'll stop now and save, boring you to death. And I will cut here, and see you again next chapter.